Hello once again, this is Mark, and we've got one more video on the IELTS Academic Writing Task 1, and that's comparing two line graphs. Now, sometimes in this exam, you're going to be comparing two sets of data. In some ways, it seems a bit more difficult, but again, if you do your initial analysis carefully, you'll be fine. So why don't we just get started? Let's have a look here. All right, so we've got two line graphs, and it says here, the two graphs below show the percentage of smokers, that's this one here, people who smoke every day, and the consumption of alcohol, that's down here, in selected countries for the period 1960 to 2000. So first of all, you've got those three countries, the USA, Japan, Holland. So here we've got Holland, and down here, the USA, so that's this one here. Japan is the lowest one there. You've also then got alcohol consumption. Here we've got the USA showing a very sharp increase, and this one is Holland showing that more steady increase. And finally, you've got Turkey, which doesn't change too much. Now, I'm just pointing that out because the picture may not be totally clear. But what I'd like you to do right now, if you're serious about getting that 8 or 7 in the IELTS exam, then you need to take 5 minutes to carefully analyze this data and make some notes and prepare your paragraphs. Please take that extra 5 minutes. It seems like a lot of time, and I know you want to start writing right away, but if you don't have your analysis done, it's going to be hard to get the rest of your writing done in 20 minutes. If you have a clear idea of the trend, if you've made your notes, if you've prepared your paragraphs, 15 minutes is more than enough time, so don't worry about it. Right now, I want you to take 5 minutes, press pause, and I'll see you right after. All right, welcome back. What did you notice? Let's take a look together at some of the finer details. All right, so here are some notes. Now, hopefully, if you've seen my other video on line graphs, you will know the first thing you should always look at is the start point and the finish point. So if you look here, you can see 1960, you've got a high percentage, and then here in 2000, it lowers quite noticeably. So that's the first thing, smoking decreases, all right? It starts at about 50% between these three, and an average of about 35% between these ones. That may be 33, doesn't really matter. So that's the first thing. Secondly, this one, it does show a lot less clearly what the trend is, but if you put it all together, there is a increase. So the consumption of alcohol starts low here, and by the end, it's higher. So that's the other thing, is that there's an increase in alcohol, but it fluctuates. So we've got up and down, and here you've got slight increase, slight decrease, slight increase. So there's a fluctuation, but overall, the starting positions are quite different. And that's one of the subtle differences that you'll want to pick up on. To get that 7 or higher, you want to pick up on those small differences. All right, so let's look at it a little bit more carefully. As we started up here, we've got a decrease in smoking, so it all comes down. Holland is the highest at the beginning. As you can see, it's way up here. And then it ends similar to the USA, right over here. Japan is always the lowest. So those are the trends. I mean, those are the main trends you need to identify, and then you can easily support them with data. The alcohol increase is the same. So there's an increase even though it fluctuates. Now, the USA shows a major increase before dropping slightly, so that's this one here, up and then down. Holland shows, in contrast, a steady rise and then fall, whereas Turkey is always low. Now, why don't we just think of it this way for our paragraphs? We've got, we'll talk we'll have one paragraph to talk about smoking, one paragraph to talk about the alcohol. Maybe we'll just have first paragraph talk about the difference, okay? So that's the overall. We'll talk about that as we look at the example. All right, so here we've got our throwaway sentence. It's the sentence you always have to write. Don't think about it too much. This should take you less than 20 seconds. You just want to get it up there. That's your summary sentence, and then you get to your overall. Overall, smoking declined dramatically, while consumption of alcohol showed fluctuation despite an overall increase. So this one is good. What I've highlighted in blue, that's pretty good. If you want to really get that higher score, you really want to point out the subtle difference. You want to point out that there is an increase. So alcohol consumption is increasing and smoking is decreasing, but alcohol is showing fluctuation. You could say, while consumption of alcohol increased despite some fluctuation. That might actually be a bit better. Oh, and by the way, you probably don't want to have overall twice in a sentence, but that's fine for this. Now, we start with our macro trend. Smoking is decreasing in the USA, Japan, and Holland. Perfect. All right. Overall, that's the macro trend. Now we go to the micro trends. Micro trend. In 1960, Holland had the highest percentage of smokers. And as you can see, that's already been put in there. Let's take that out. Nearly 60% data. So again, trend, data. Then followed by Japan, trend, data. Trend, data. All right. So that's the key thing to point out here. By the way, pardon, it seems I've misspoken. USA was always this smaller one, and Japan was a little bit higher. So that's my mistake. I apologize for that. The USA was the lower one, and Japan was this one here. So that covers your main point about 1960. All right, you've talked about 1960, and that's the overall trend supported by data. Then we get specifically to Holland. Holland showed the biggest drop. Perfect. You've got your overall trend, 60 down to roughly 40 or 39. So Holland showed the biggest drop. Then data falling to 43% in 1980, at which point it's steadily continued its downward trend. Again, that's the trend followed by data. USA, similar. Trend, data. Japan, same thing. Trend, it nearly halved, and that's one of the key things to look out for in the IELTS exam. When something decreases by half, they love that stuff, so make sure you point that out. Japan's consumption nearly halved, falling from 40% to 20%. All right, now here, throughout the period, it had the lowest percentage of smokers. So again, Japan throughout the period was always at the lower one. Again, nice overall trend to point out. Between the three countries in 1960, there was an average rate of 50%, which came down to 33% by 2000. So I've done a little bit of the math here, and I've pointed out here, the average is roughly 50%, and by this point it's now 33 because you've got two of them here. It's going to be roughly 33%. You don't have to be totally accurate here, but as close as you can get. So again, I've got the overall trend here, and I then go with that trend data, all right? So that's the key thing to remember, trend followed by data. Next, I move on to alcohol consumption. Now, I could probably say here, alcohol consumption in contrast. So again, I'm linking it back to this entire paragraph, is showing an upward trend although there is no common trend between the countries. Now, that's something to always remember. If there is no common trend, that is fine, but you need to say it in your text. Remember, no change is also something to mention in your task 1. And I've mentioned here the 3 countries, USA, Holland, and Turkey. The USA increased sharply between 1960 and 1980. So again, I go with the trend and then reaching a peak of 11 liters. All right, 11 liters per person. At which time it was the highest amount between the 3 countries. So again, I've supported with that key point. So remember, it's not just saying, and then it went up, and then it went down, and then it went up. You know, if it's the highest at that point, then you should mention it. After this, it fell slightly. Again, trend, leveling off at just under 10 liters. All right, and I should probably add there in 2000. It retained its position as the top consumer of alcohol. So I mentioned that it reaches a peak and that it's the highest amount of the 3 countries, and then I mentioned it has retained its position as the top consumer of alcohol. So again, you point out it peaked, and then it's still number 1. Moving on to Holland, I've started with Holland, showed a less pronounced increase. So again, that's really nice to say less pronounced increase, so a smaller increase or a less obvious increase. Now that's really good because it links back to all of this. So the cohesion in this paragraph is strong. Holland showed a less pronounced increase. All right, trend rising from just under 8 liters in 1960, data. So again, trend, data. Peaking at around 10 liters in consumption before falling back to 8 liters in 2000. Now, take a minute here and notice this is a really nice grammatical structure I've put up here. I've got multiple complex participle clauses. Holland showed a less pronounced increase, comma, rising from just under 8 liters in 1960, peaking before falling. All right, so ing, ing, before ing. All right, so it's after that comma, you put in your 3 participle clauses. A bit complex, but again, worth practicing. And it works really nice here because it's, just very quick. Although it began at a higher consumption rate, and I'm missing a word here, than that of the USA. So again, although it began at a higher consumption rate than that of the USA, it is now the 2nd biggest consumer. So I point that out, right? Although it started here higher, it is now a lower consumer, even though it's the original number. Finally, Turkey showed a notably different trend. Again, that now links both of these parts of the paragraph to this, a notably different trend from all this. Starting low at less than 1 liter in 1960, rising only slightly to about 1.5 liters in 1960 and 2000. So again, you see that grammar construction here, the grammar structure where I say the trend and then follow it with these 2 ing clauses. Again, there's not much to talk about here, so it's a really good opportunity to use this structure. Overall, between the 3 countries, consumption increased roughly 12 liters to 18.5 liters. So again, I'm highlighting that the numbers here were lower than these numbers. And again, this is probably the number 1 thing that students miss, is they don't pay attention to the starting and finishing period and what that tells us, all right? The macro trend. Overall, people are smoking less, but they're drinking more. Now again, it's a bit unusual because you've got 2 different countries here. So it's a bit difficult to make a comparison because, Turkey is here and Japan is here. If, this were, say, 3 countries in South America or 3 countries in Europe. Maybe you could make a more general overall about drinking in South America or Europe, but here you can't really do that. And that's important. You don't want to speculate or make up data. So we'll just leave it at that. Now we'll make one final point. Let's take a look at some final notes. So just remember, pay attention to the start and finish points. That's what we talked about over here, right? Start, finish. Show the macro trend. Overall, it's a decrease, or overall, it's an increase despite fluctuations, and support it with data. Remember that. It should be in your mind when you analyze these graphs. Trend, data, trend, data. Don't just talk about how it increased and then decreased and then increased again. Show the trend and then support it with the data. And of course, as I always say, practice, practice, practice. If you've got the exam tomorrow and you're just watching this video now, you better practice a lot tonight. But hopefully you've got a couple of months and hopefully you've got someone who can give you feedback. A teacher can just make sure that your grammar is getting more and more accurate. And remember, take that feedback and review it. Fix your grammatical mistakes. Practice rewriting the whole task again. That's going to help you in the long run. That's going to help you improve your grammatical accuracy. But remember, you want to have your structure clear first. So that's the main thing. Structure comes first, and then grammar will follow the organization. So remember, if you go trend, data, then your grammar is going to be more complex, and you're going to push for that higher score. I want you all to get 7s and 8s, so as the last point says here, practice, practice, practice. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section below. And otherwise, good luck on your test, everybody.